or hotels are answering questions on behalf of these travel groups. These questions can range from anywhere from 50 to 300 questions, right? I mean, that's a lot of burden on hoteliers who are already working. There's managers that are actually cleaning rooms. They're down from, say, 200 employees to 10 employees to run a hotel. And when you're trying to do a lot more with a lot less, than to actually have the additional burden of making sure you have PPE, making sure you're covering certain areas, it's a lot of responsibility. So what we did was we developed a product called Track and Clean. So whereas our safety button, for example, is a button that gets, when it's activated, it gives a real-time location of the employee, or if it's an asset that we're tracking, then it's an asset that, we can tell you where that asset is. What we did was we did a triangulation. Instead of triangulation of just location, we did a triangulation of what all is in that location. So the employee, um, the electrostatic sprayer, the housekeeping cart, the vacuum cleaner, and how long were they there, to cross multiply and say that, okay, if all of these are here, then that means the room has been cleaned, and it was cleaned at 11:01 a.m. this morning. It was cleaned for 20 minutes, and it allowed for X, Y, and Z. And even, like, as a guest, you could come in, and normally, whereas a guest, you would get a text message that says, "Welcome to Hilton Hotels. Your room is 609." You could say, "Well, give me more details." You could, say detail or D, text that back, and you would get a detail of, well, your room was clean then, this is how long it took, this is the, equipment that was used. And you could ask for more details, like, when was the elevator lobby cleaned? When were the public areas cleaned? How often are they cleaned? What's the hotel's protocol? Because when you're checking in, and I don't know about most folks, I know I get overwhelmed, right? Because you're managing your bag, you're getting your room key, you're signing papers, you're giving credit card, giving your ID, and then you're learning all this about, well, the spa opens at this time, the amenities are available then, and this is, so it's a lot of information to absorb. And this is, like, we found that we could help communicate that to guests, because when you walk away from that front desk person, that's usually when you say, "Oh, wait, I wanted to know more about this." And you could use that texting platform to be able to get information about cleanliness. And our goal really was that we wanted to help hotels reassure guests so they felt comfortable coming back, and also create an alerting platform. So for public areas, it was like we could trigger alerts and say, "Hey, your protocol is to clean elevator lobbies every 90 minutes. So we can automatically create an alert that every 90 minutes someone goes back and actually cleans everything down," and so on and so forth. So that's what we did with Track and Clean.
I'd imagine that there are that's something that's both scalable as well as expandable to other businesses. I know from we've handled and responded to hundreds of COVID complaints that OSHA gets. I think the agency, the last statistic I heard was that they've probably received over 50,000 complaints from employees across the country. And typically they will send a letter to the company, and then you need to summarize what you're doing in response. And a number of the area offices, particularly here in Illinois, they don't just take what you say. They then respond back. What proof do you have of what you've done? One investigator said to me, trust but verify. And so it sounds like that. I think that that's what really what you're describing. That you give the companies the ability to verify what is supposed to be done is actually being done. And I can see that being used in retail. I mean, I think we all, if you're choosing a grocery store, do you want to shop in the one that that they're cleaning the carts, or that that the store was fogged down overnight, versus the one that you have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think like at the airport, there's those sign-in sheets when you go to the bathrooms and you see someone, was there an hour ago. It makes you feel better. It's that whole thing. And it does make you feel like someone is doing something. This is, you don't know exactly what they did when they were there. I mean, it's not like we can verify that they went into every stall, they did everything, what they were supposed to. But there is a certain amount of trust factor, because you can see some transparency that there's a process to monitor it. You trust in that process then. And that's what we wanted to do, was we wanted to provide that process, and I love the way you said it, trust but verify. That's exactly what we do. So we're not saying that hotels aren't doing it without us. They're definitely doing it, but this is our way of being able to provide the data to show that they're doing it so that the travelers feel better about going back to traveling again.
And is that something that that could even be? I know a lot of my clients in the warehouse and distribution industry, for example, their sites are full of forklifts and pallet jacks and that sort of those sort of assets. I think to be able to track, where those have been, but also that they've been cleaned between uses. So I don't know if that's something that your product would be able to be adapted for. It sounds like it
Definitely.
probably would.
Yeah, it can be.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll come back and hopefully have a little
Yep.
more dialogue. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before?
No, I'm gonna turn it over to Lisa because
Okay.
all of us I know all of us have great products. So turn it over to Lisa.
Well, awesome. I think it's been really interesting, having been now in this space where we're able to use our technology for something, that's highly relevant right now. It's also, really inspiring hearing what else is going on out there and kind of what people's struggles are. And I did enjoy hearing what was going on in OSHA as well. And I'm like, I can't even believe how many complaints you're dealing with. It's got to be insane. Um, so, like Paraminder, we did have a technology that was being used prior to COVID, for a different situation, a different use case. We have a hardware and a software platform that prior to March 2020 was being used at events all over the world to help people better connect and have more meaningful engagements, and then ultimately measure and communicate ROI to all event stakeholders. What we were really doing is tracking person-to-person interaction so that event participants could more seamlessly follow up with people that they had met at meetings, that we could, close down and limit the time on customer acquisition. You could follow up right away because you've got a record right there of everybody you met with. And then also for event hosts, we had data that really showed what was the meeting impact, not just who went where, who went to what sessions, but who really engaged with whom. How many face-to-face interactions did your event inspire? Were those between culturally diverse people? Were those between men and women? So we had all those data points. And obviously, when COVID-19 happened and everything shut down in March, face-to-face meetings were no longer happening. And so we had the opportunity to either do one of three things: move into some sort of using our technology on a software side. We could go on pause and say, well, wait for meetings to come back. And back in March, we thought maybe this was going to be end of the summer, right? Or we could retool and utilize our hardware plus our software in a new way. And that's ultimately what we decided to do. We did. We added new technology onto the hardware. The devices now do give a visual alert. They light up and blink red when people are wearing them and they're within 6 feet. And then we stood up a whole new database and a whole new web platform that acquires data from these badges in real time, so that if there is an outbreak as people are coming back into the office, human resources or risk management officers can immediately pull a report on that employee, on that individual, and download a report of, and go and keep up with CDC guidelines. So right now it says you need to go back 2 weeks. We want to know if there were any interactions that over a 24-hour period added up to 15 minutes or more in aggregate. So they set those toggles in their web portal in the dashboard, and a report will spit out. They'll have every individual identified right away. And now if they're bringing back, tens, hundreds, thousands of employees, rather than manually trying to contact trace and call these employees, within seconds, they have a report that they can act on to contain the spread in the office. They're also using the data to run preliminary dashboards. So, as you start bringing more and more employees back to the office, you can run a report and say, hey, over the past week, 2 days, what's been going on in my office? How well are we doing at social distancing? If one of these employees does in fact come down with COVID and we do need to contact trace, what's the potential spread here? They have all of that data at their fingertips. And it was, personally really rewarding to go from, a place where it looked like COVID was going to shut us down, or we had no real meaningful play, because our company is based on face to face, helping people have better interactions, measure, track it, act on it. And then all of a sudden, we're shut down. And this was an opportunity for us to really to make a difference. We're working with some of the biggest companies in the country, and it's been really awesome to see, hear their use cases and their case studies on it, and how it's really helping get people back.
Do you find that you're being either retained or your services purchased by in one industry more than another, or is it fairly industry agnostic?
Yeah, so originally we were really focused on essential workforce. So, manufacturing, packaging, warehouse. We had some meat packing clients initially. I'll show you the badge. This is the hardware. I mean, it was not designed for like, this is kind of like a sexy conference badge, right? And
Right.
So then all of a sudden people are wearing this in meat packing plants. It absolutely worked, maybe not designed, perfectly for it. But the technology worked really well. It doesn't require any pre-installed tech. It's out of the box. Clients get this, they turn it on. It works with their existing enterprise Wi-Fi. And so it was really awesome that they were able to activate it so quickly. But now it is also, now we're more into office workers, people that are bringing back or have an essential workforce that is, they've got their essential people coming in, like their data people, or the kind of the cleaning crew, and that, we've got window washers, people that are still coming in to manage the building. But the clients that we have that are doing that are looking to bring back, 10, 15, 50% of their workforce starting this summer. And they're making it their company policy that anyone that comes on campus will be wearing one of these devices, whether it's a guest or employee.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's a number of kind of aspects to it that from a regulatory standpoint, and it's kind of a sad commentary on my life, I suppose. It really excites me because it's like, wow, it can be, I think in some ways a game changer, as you said. Maybe talk a little bit about that, the immediacy of the response that you can provide, or the information, because like you said, I think the contact tracing can be long and laborious, and by the time you physically do it by interviewing people, it's either too late or it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what Paraminder said, where it's hotels are operating on a skeletal crew and expecting to do more than ever before, right? And so similarly with these companies, in human resources, risk management, all of a sudden they're in charge of every aspect of risk management, and a huge piece of that is contact tracing. And so all of a sudden now their jobs, they're spending all 8 hours of the day, if not more, making calls. And I don't think it's super rewarding if that's how you're doing it either, because by the time you get a hold of somebody, it might be too late. But with our system, we are able to go out second and third degrees. So if a company wanted to say, maybe Lisa's got COVID, she interacted with Aaron, and Aaron interacted with Lori, Lori's a secondary risk, we're going to go and you can pull that report in seconds. Like that would take you hours to get to that information, and you may never get it because you're relying on human, your memory. Like, what if Aaron, I don't know you, and we're in the elevator together? You're an absolute risk if I come down with COVID and we spend a few minutes there. But if I don't know you and I can't report, the person that I ran into the elevator with a week ago, you're off spreading it, potentially, right?
Yeah, we've been going through in one inspection that OSHA is conducting, trying to justify why certain people were not isolated or quarantined, and they are pointing to their contact tracing, but just like you said, I mean, when it comes down to it, people will testify like, well, yeah, he wasn't sure who he interacted with, and he wasn't sure. He may have been in contact with that person. He may not have been. And aside from the quarantine portion, one thing I didn't talk about, and we're at the time right now, February 1st is when, for those employers that have to maintain an OSHA 300 log, which is a record of injuries and illnesses that are work related, OSHA is expecting employers to put work-related cases of COVID on the 300 log if you have to maintain one. A lot of office environments don't have to maintain these logs, but for those folks that do, if you can establish that this employee had no contact in the workplace, certainly no close contact, or not even any, oh yeah, he was within 6 feet of one COVID positive person for 30 seconds. That almost becomes proof positive that person is not a work related case. So I think that's another piece. And I don't know how much, if are you working much with folks in California?
Yeah, so January 1st with the new regulation, we're working with a lot of set production. I actually see some of our shows now that we worked on TV, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta look for our badges in there, and it kills me. The actors, the production teams, they're all on site and they have to, by law, notify anybody or close down completely. And so just like you said, Aaron, this is a way for businesses to stay open. If there is a case, unless they have a technology or a way to prove that they are they're using data and they're doing going broad enough in terms of contact tracing, they would have to close all the way down.
Yeah, in California, which had issued at the end of last year, easily the most comprehensive and I'd say restrictive OSHA standard, Cal OSHA issued. It just applies in California. There are two elements where knowing where your employees have gone and how long they've been there would be essential. One is the quarantine piece, because unlike the rest of the country, California does not recognize a critical infrastructure exception. So regardless of the business, whether it's I think other than doctors' offices, but our pet healthcare clients, our pharmacy clients that are going to be administering vaccines, if that pharmacist has a close contact, he or she is going to have to quarantine for 10 days in California. But if we could establish, no, this person didn't have a close contact categorically based on this tech, that's one way to avoid it. And the other thing that California is requiring is testing when there's an outbreak, meaning 3 or more positive cases within a 2-week period. You then have to offer testing at no charge on company time, meaning either while people are working or you have to pay them if they go test off work hours. To everybody who worked in what's called the exposed workplace. And it's very difficult to determine what is the exposed workplace because the exposed workplace is where the COVID positive people were. And so if you can add, and even like Parminder, that if you could track where people were or certain assets where you can then help in using this tech as well, figure out where are those exposed workplaces. No, the exposed workplace is not the entire production floor. It's just this one department or this one corner of the floor where this one COVID positive person was. We can show he or she didn't go anywhere else or wasn't in the break room at the same time as these other people. And that can save significant costs associated with testing as well. And the reason I know we're in Illinois, hopefully the Cal OSHA standard stays in California, but President Biden has just nominated the former head of the California Department of Labor, Julie Su, to be the number 2 person at the U.S. Department of Labor. So there's, when they're
OSHA, making our case for us. I mean, it's great for business. We have some partners we work with, and they're like, it's like the law just came out and said you have to use our tech, and I was like, we'll take it. But yeah.
Well, good. So that's exciting. So and hopefully we'll have some. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I saw questions in the chat, but I know we're getting close to 6, so I want to make sure Ken has some time too.
Ken, let's Ken's got another exciting technology that I know, and I've already, I think, introduced Ken to or brokering an introduction to one client because I think it's something that I know a lot of, particularly my manufacturing clients, where people are coming and going, and everyone needs to check in. Asking about the symptoms and stuff is a challenge. So Ken, I'll let you tell everyone about your exciting product.
Yeah, no, thanks, Aaron. Thanks to the Hub88 team for the invite here. I'll keep mine very brief, but very similar to kind of Lisa and the rest of the group here. My company, Track It Media, got started about 3.5 years ago, and we specialized in the event space. So we are a digital display solutions company. So we provide touchless solutions for digital displays around events. So think convention centers, hospitality venues. Well, obviously, events, convention centers don't mix with COVID. So, we had to adjust and kind of reassess ourselves last year around March, right? Just like everybody else kind of did in this group here, and said, what can we do? And how can we provide value with our product to the businesses that are still running, that were deemed essential? But not only, can we, not only did we look to solve a short-term solution, we wanted to provide a solution that was going to, outlast COVID as well, right? We prided ourselves, back when we started the company, that we were going to be all about touchless. So long before touchless was cool, that's what we wanted to be known for. So we were pushing QR codes with every turn, different social media interactions to get people to engage with our screens without having to physically touch the screens for various reasons. One of the things that I'm actually most proud about that our clients are really utilizing from our product is what we call gesture sensors. So they're little sensors that get attached to our screen that actually track your hand. So they give you the ability to control any digital display, any screen, without having to physically touch the screen. So you can tap, swipe, expand, just like Iron Man. If you've ever seen the Marvel movies where he kind of controls things with his hands, that's what we're able to do with our screen. So it's pretty cool there. But kind of, as Aaron was alluded to, last year, we really had to reassess our product, and we started to, we pivoted. I hate using that word because it's been overplayed, but we added more, is what I'll say, to our platform so that we could help businesses, again, that were deemed essential, and that were having people come to the workplace, warehouses, distribution centers, meat packing, companies, things of that nature, right? Stay open safely. So what we did was we created these industrial displays that could withstand certain elements, which were, industrial houses, warehouses, things of that nature, that actually have thermal cameras attached to them. So now people, when they enter a building, they can check in. It has facial recognition, mask detection. So when you check in, it'll know if you're an employee or not by your face. At the same time you're checking in, it will scan for an elevated body temperature or not. If you have an elevated body temperature, it will send a notification to the on-site manager or the HR manager, letting them know that, hey, Ken Clay just checked in at 5 o'clock a.m., right? He had an elevated body temperature. You may need to pull him to a side to go through your, protocols that you guys have set in place. For visitors and guests, we also have the ability to check in, all touchless from our kiosk as well. They actually check in from their phone. So think of deliveries, right? UPS drivers, FedEx, Amazon, all that kind of stuff. When they drop off packages, they can check in as well, scan the QR code, fill out the little questionnaire. They also can say who they're there to visit. So if I come to an office building and I interact with one of my kiosks, I'm a guest, I check in, it'll actually send a notification of who I'm there to visit. And they've got to confirm that, yes, this person has been approved, to come in for my appointment to meet with me. So it truly is like an access control platform to help keep these units safe. And because our platform was always open, right, for integration, we've been able to integrate with a lot of access control and security systems for a lot of buildings, which has been nice as well for a lot of businesses. So I want to get to the questions just like Lisa. So that's my quick little spiel. I don't know. I'm better at answering questions than talking about my company and product.
I mean, I would just add to that what's like I said, I think I alluded to at the beginning, what's exciting about this is the ability to not only to check people in, but to go through, I assume that they could answer symptoms related questions or have you traveled here? And like you said, just by pointing at the screen, and I think I prefer the Iron Man analogy as opposed to the CSI TV show where they were doing all that kind of stuff. But I know, Ken, you demoed it for me, and I think that's something that I assume that you have the capability not only then to also record, again, trust and verify that an employer, if questioned by OSHA, can say, oh, we actually have records, so we can confirm that everybody everybody who's worked here for the last 6 months been symptom free when they checked in, at least according to the questions that they answered.
Yep, exactly. And again, kind of, this is more in your world. I never thought that I'd go this far into kind of the OSHA, workplace safety world. But when we started to provide these things and roll these devices out to a lot of businesses, they were telling us, oh, this is a great solution for us, even, COVID aside, because we always get asked when, an accident happens at the workplace or a fire happens or whatever the case may be, OSHA comes on site and they say, well, who was in the building at the time, right? You need to have those records for us. So our system is able to do that for them as well, which has been pretty cool. And, again, not to say that we're the greatest, thermal station, that's out there. Everyone's kind of doing that now, but what makes our product different is that it's an industrialized unit. So again, it can kind of withstand certain elements, right? It's not just an iPad on a pedestal and you got to stand like 2 inches away, which to me is kind of gross because everyone's doing that. You can actually stand 6 feet away from this unit. It gets an accurate description, but at the same time, again, it's multi-purposeful, right? It checks you in to a building. You can have basically your ledger working off of the smartphone. So,
thank you. Yeah. So, any questions from the group for any of our speakers?
I think we had one in chat that was directed at you, Lisa. But I think it's interesting for all of them. They asked Darnie asked, do you see a greater potential in from the event industry into this contact tracing? But I think that leads to what do people, how is this going to change as we all get vaccinated? How our workplace is going to change with regards to how they check people in, how they track people, all of that. So that's a wide open question.
Well, I'll start, I guess. I think interestingly, as you look at events, and, if we imagine the world now 6-9 months, even next year, where we've hit a critical mass in terms of, vaccination, I think, I was just on the phone with some partners on the event side this morning, and we were saying, now with the events, how we've all gone virtual for all of these events, we've kind of become data junkies, right? We have, we're so used to now being able to track, who's going into what breakout rooms, who's having one-on-one meetings, what are their interests, how long are they engaging, who's staying in these sessions. Like we know probably on the Zoom, how many people stayed when they left. We've got all of these data points now that as we go back into in-person, event organizers, hosts, marketing professionals, they're getting used to having these data points now. They're going to want that as we go back to in-person. And so because we're a peer-to-peer platform, we were already doing this for events pre-COVID. But I think, the stakeholders now, their eyes are open as to what all of this data could do and really is worth. Whereas we were up against a little bit pre-COVID where we were so new and ahead of everything that, they were like, well, we can put a little beacon on everyone's badge and we'll track who went to what session. And that was enough. But now, it absolutely isn't enough. And then real quickly, as with these enterprise clients that we're working with now, as they start bringing back people and we're looking at like, how has this impacted women, minorities, how can we really foster inclusivity? We've already got this badge, we own it. Let's keep the subscription going and do things like social network analysis. Let's understand the dynamics of our teams. We can put together now those charts where you can really see like the hub and spoke, who are the leaders, who are people gravitating toward, who's on the fringe that needs to be brought in, and start getting really predictive and really partner with our clients to do more than keeping their employees safe. So I'm pretty excited about both angles of where this could go, because I think there really is a lot more value even beyond, the immediate need that we're filling right now.
Thank you. And what do you think, Ken and Parminder, about the longer term, long tail here about how this is going to change our lives?
Yeah, I was, I was thinking back last year when this first hit, I lived through SARS in Toronto, and back then things went back to normal within 6 to 8 months. Things were back to normal, and if you had worn a mask on the trains, you didn't anymore 6 months later, and people forgot about it. And I think that's sort of the perception is that people, first of all, the industries aren't expected to be back to normal, especially the hotel industry till about between 2022 and 2023 is when travel is really expected to pick up, because 2021 there will be some hesitancy, vaccinations and so on, but global travel in itself, domestic travel will pick up, but then global travel will still be there. And as you know, airlines are considering, do they ask for negative test results before you travel globally? And that, I think it's likely that that will happen, because I know I went to Puerto Rico over Christmas with my daughter, and they wanted a negative test submitted online before you could travel to Puerto Rico, which actually made me feel better about traveling there, right? The fact that all travelers were providing that made me feel better about being there. Now, and being careful on the island and so on. So I think that's what the airlines are seeing, is a trend that if a destination asks for a test, people feel better going there. It's that whole thing of like, if hotels can advertise that they're cleaning and here's the data, people will feel better going there. And while we might think that the memory this time will be similar like SARS, like a couple of years later, we'll forget about it. And I hate to use the word scars, but I think we've all been scarred to a certain extent. We've never gone through what we've gone through this time. We've never seen the impact of it within our friends and families, and the losses we've seen, the struggles with people getting sick, the economics of it. I think the scars are, they go in so many different ways. We never had that impact with anything that's happened before. So to see it in so many different facets, I don't think it's going to go away in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, will it go away in 5 years? Your guess is as good as mine, possibly. But I think there's certain aspects of business that will fundamentally change. And I'll say this even for events, right? I don't know when we'll see the events like we did in Vegas, like CES, hundreds and thousands of people descending on a city, Southwest by South, South by Southwest, in Austin. I don't know when we're going to see events like that come back. I think we're going to see a lot more of a slow movement, hybrid. And so with that, given that it might take us 5 years or even 7 years to come back, and then we don't know what all will happen in those years, I think a lot of what we're developing now will become part of, just the ongoing policies moving forward. So that's sort of the perspective. So I think the changes, and again, I'm with Ken, I don't like the word pivots, but how we've evolved during this time is really going to help us into the next phase of what we do.
Ken, anything else to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess I'm very fortunate in this regard that my product's not that sophisticated. So it's just a content management system for displays. So it really has a need. Again, long after COVID, it just kind of serves multi-purposes. But, kind of echoing what everyone's saying there is that I think people are just going to get smarter and look for more solutions for their businesses, because I do know that they're going to fight like hell going forward to keep their businesses open and to keep things moving in the right direction and opening back up. So at least from who we've talked to in the events world, right, they're ready to come back in 2021. PGA is one of our clients, and they're looking at all different types of solutions to get fans back into the stands, right? And so they want to do this, but they need to do it smart, right? And so these type of solutions are going to become part of the, normal RFPs now, right? Where before the RFPs, they were looking for food vendors and transportation vendors. Now it's going to be like, all right, what are some safety solutions that we can have, on this RFP that need to go out for bid? So.
And Erin, how long how long are the California laws right now? I mean, I think they go through 20, they've made it 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, each state is a little bit different. Some of them are 6 months. Some of them are through the year. Virginia, which is interesting. So, if you had kind of laid odds on which state would be the first to introduce its standard, its COVID standard, I don't know that many people would have guessed Virginia. And Virginia, I mean, pretty much beat the field by quite a while. Their standard was introduced. I think middle of last year, if I remember correctly, and they've already introduced a permanent infectious disease standard. And I think really so COVID. I think they're essentially thinking, and part of this is a rulemaking issue. It's that these emergency standards can only be in effect for so long. So by making a permanent standard, this is in part to ensure that the people who are not vaccinated, either for medical reasons, for religious reasons, what have you, that workplace measures remain in place, as long as necessary to protect everybody. So it's not just like, hey, well, everyone's been vaccinated, so we're going to stop. Prime Minister here said, we're going to stop wearing masks or what have you. I wouldn't be surprised if, after issuing an emergency standard in March, assuming that happens, and OSHA is engaging in what they're calling kind of a number of listening sessions, taking feedback and input from the regulated community, employers as well as the unions and employees, which is a refreshing change. A lot in the past, a lot of times OSHA would just forge ahead and ignoring the business community, and I think all stakeholders need to have a voice here. And so the fact that they are going to listen to the regulated community, and early returns suggest that the Marty Walsh, who's the newly installed Secretary of Labor, has spoken positively about the Virginia standard. And what many employers like about the Virginia standard is a lot of the requirements are tied to CDC guidance, which means that the standard is basically saying to employers, you need to track what the CDC is doing, and if you're doing what the CDC recommends, you're okay. California opted for a very different approach and basically said, no, this is forget the CDC. This is what we recommend, and it's static, and so it's not as flexible. So prior to all of this, OSHA had years ago started rulemaking on a general infectious disease standard. I would not be surprised to see that permanent rulemaking process begin. And rulemaking at the federal level is a very slow and ponderous process. But I think there are steps they can take to fast track it, because I think ultimately OSHA would want something in place that when the next pandemic hits and everything, not to be Debbie Downer, a lot of the experts seem to think it's not going to be 100 years before the next one hits, and hopefully it's not anything is quite this bad. But if it's spread in a different way, if it's spread more, not so much through the air but through touch or what have you, then that standard will be able to adapt to that, and the agency will have the ability to change the regulations in such a way that there's a quick and meaningful response.
Yeah, I have to say that that this COVID pandemic has made me wonder about safety, just in going to hotels, going into meeting places, like what don't I know, like, okay, now we've got COVID under control, but now there's already different strains coming. Like, what do I know? How do I protect myself? And I like the idea of being able to sort of, like Ken, when you were talking about coming in and it alerts HR that someone's temperature is above normal, I don't know how quickly then, if they come at 5, I don't think HR is getting there till 8, so there's some time. But then you work with Lisa's product and you figure out who they talk to in the last 3 hours. And then together you've got the data you need.
Well, people may want to. There may be companies that decide, next flu season, I still want to know if people have a temperature.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, there are benefits to that.
Whoa.
And think about. mean, Lori, you talk about how much we've learned so quickly, right? I took, I remember this very vividly. My last business trip was March 3rd to 6th. We actually, ironically, it was a meeting of the American Bar Association's OSHA Lawyer Committee, and we flew to Palm Desert, California. We had a meeting in a big conference room with 150 people. I think we were the last meeting that the ABA had before they ended meetings. And for me, what was the big thing? I went out and I got disinfectant wipes to wipe down the tray table and the armrest on the
Right.
airplane. And I remember the first day of this event, everybody gets up and introduces themselves to the group, 150 lawyers or so it didn't take too long. And there's a microphone that gets passed around from one person to another. And one of my colleagues who was there, who's an industrial hygiene expert, when the microphone got to her, she was the only person in the room that's like, you know what? I'll talk loud enough. I'll introduce myself.
How are you?
Out the microphone. I'll let the next person take the microphone.
What?
A lot of people thought she's a kook, right? And so
Right.
now we know a lot more about how it spread. We were all washing our groceries and all that kind of business. So the science we've caught up to the science, or the science has caught up to what's actually happening. And I hope that if there's a standard in place, the next time something happens, we'll be have a little better sense of the things that we need to do in the workplace to keep people safe.
Yeah, and respond, and can respond more quickly and that sort of thing. Now, someone had sent me a question privately, so let me ask you, Ken Clay, it was for you. Can electronic visual entrance devices replace typical check-in?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I
absolutely.
would think.
Yeah, so that's kind of why we did it, right? So everybody had name badges or IDs. You have RFID scanners, things of that nature. Those are kind of the most advanced solutions that were out there. Why we really decided to do it, because we saw the people were checking in with pen and paper, right? When they would come and visit a building or a warehouse, or industrial building. So we said, well, you don't need that pen and paper. All of this can be done literally in real time, electronically, right? So that was the idea and the intent, and that's why we believe that it can outlast COVID as a solution for helping people go back into not just warehouse offices, but their normal office, right? When you think about all those buildings and office buildings downtown, right? You don't need that front desk worker anymore. All of this can be automated.
Yeah. I know I'll never touch a microphone again. So yeah. Or someone, some of you tech geniuses need to come up with a contactless microphone distance unit.
Well,
Okay, let's go.
In the inauguration, that one gentleman whose job it was to wipe down the microphone.
Right, or that, right. We don't want a human losing their job to tech. Not one more of those.
You notice he wasn't wearing gloves. So
He wasn't wearing gloves.
touched the podium after. I cringed because I was like, you just wiped it.
Yep.
What are you doing?
Yeah. All right, more questions. Either unmute yourselves and ask the panel, or you can pop it into chat and Aaron or I will ask it. I don't see anything. So what else do you all want to, we've got a few more minutes, and we can end at any time that makes sense, but what else do you think we should know? I'm curious if OSHA, well, I don't know. Let me think about that question. Ken, you were going to say something.
I think I was going to ask what you were thinking. This is for Aaron, really. Aaron, what do you think that businesses, right, should most be aware of, right, or cognizant of that you think OSHA is going to, bring to light here?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think, I keep at least until there's a standard, and the I don't want to say risk, but the challenge in a state complying with a standard is the standard is likely going to have, who knows how many sub requirements, 10, 15, 20 different things. So you need to conduct a hazard assessment. You need to so Oregon has its own standard. You have to conduct a hazard assessment, you have to document it. It needs to be in writing. Then you need to develop a written plan. You need to post the plan. And so they can come in and you could do everything right. You could make it a year without a single COVID positive employee in your workplace, but they say, oh, you didn't post it. Here's a fine. Now, hopefully not posting a document, it's a very small fine, but nobody wants to be fined by OSHA, particularly saying that you have a deficient COVID response, because then your employees are upset and maybe people don't want to work for you. It's a press release, whatever. So we'll see what's in the standard, and that will kind of dictate and at least give. On the other hand, it'll give clear guidance of what the agency expects from you. Right now, it really is this big picture of making sure that you're doing all the different things that the CDC recommends, and that's one of the real challenges is how who someone needs to be responsible for tracking that guidance, because it changes a lot, and then putting into practice those changes. When they changed the definition, at least as you talked about, the definition of close contact was changed. Everybody had to scramble, change their systems, change their policies. It went from being 15 minutes consecutive to 15 minutes cumulative, which was a big change and much harder to track. I remember if I talked to somebody for 15 minutes, I might not remember if I talked to them 5 times 3 minutes each.
Right.
So I think that, looking at pulling out OSHA's guidance, looking at the CDC's guidance, and making sure that you're checking all the boxes that I talked about. I mean, those are kind of the minimum elements of an effective COVID plan, but making sure you're doing all those things, and yet understanding at the same time that I've got one client actually with the Naperville area office that's, being run through the ringer on an inspection. One slip up, kind of one meeting that happened that probably should have been broken up. Somebody, it led to an outbreak. Somebody passed away. That could have as easily happened just from that person could have easily have gotten it, outside of the workplace or in a regular work setting, but a small group gathered. Some manager comes in, didn't break it up as quickly as they should have. At least that's what OSHA is going to say. And now everything that they've done good is going to be judged based on one kind of snap decision. So my job is to convince the agency that you need to look at the big picture and not this one event. But it's a hard thing. I think with Lisa, what your business is and tracking meetings. We are social beings. We gravitate towards each other. We want to interact with people. So when I think about what's going to happen to these, what's going to happen to Parminder, what you're talking about in a year, travel. I agree. And people are going to travel domestically, but do I want to get on a plane to fly to Paris or London or someplace where I'm not near my doctor if I do get sick? Do I want to go to a meeting? Depending on what type of meeting, I think you're going to see some sort of, just like working in an office versus working from home. I think you're going to see something of a hybrid where you just can't, even though Ken was talking about at the beginning, it sounds like that's a really interesting platform to enhance the virtual meetings, because the one thing you can't really create is networking. We can deliver effective content in via Zoom. I think through the work I do at the Illinois Manufacturers Association, the webinars we do, we probably got more people to attend this year during Safety Month because everyone could just log in for an hour or hour and a half and go back to work, as opposed to the year before when we had meetings in like Champaign-Urbana and the northwest suburbs, where people would probably have to give up half a day or a full day to get there. But at the same time, we still want to have some meetings where people can talk before, during, and after the events. So it's going to be interesting to see how those things change.
Do you think then
Sure.
Go ahead, Parminder.
Oh, no, I was going to say that's definitely true. The things are good. It's going to be interesting to see, because some of an article I was reading just before getting on the panel is that just like airlines, hotels are now going to provide on-site testing for events. So certain event coordinators or employers can say, hey, if you're going to attend this conference, think about, we think about events, but there's also internal events, right? Company like Google with its own mini conferences, little departmental meetings or conferences where they book hotels. Hotels will actually, and Marriott put out an article as at Gaylord Hotels that they will be willing to provide those on-site testing platforms where people can either submit that they had their test prior to arriving, and so it could be within 72 hours, or they were willing to get a test on site. So when you look at those things, the thing that the next wave of what I think is coming, and Aaron, from OSHA's perspective, it's also like the being able to track that. So imagine CES now saying, hey, you have to get tested before you come to CES. And now people are going to have those records about you. How comfortable will people be with that data? And I think that really is, what was it earlier today? I read about Florida, the water plant in Florida, where they had the cybersecurity issue, and someone was able to get into the water plant's systems through the internet and able to change the chemical.
Oh,
Yeah, it was crazy. I was reading that earlier about cybersecurity because we're very concerned about cybersecurity, and we're also, of course, addressing that because we are a safety platform. And so we want to make sure that we're complying with all sorts of things. So that was something I was reading earlier. And then this article about, okay, now hotels are going to be providing testing. When you look at all those things and put that together, I think that's the other thing that's going to come out of it is, yes, people will provide these tests. Where all will they provide it? Will they have it in airports now? So if, for example, you forgot to get a test or you didn't get a test, will airlines accept it if you get a test at the airport? And is that something that's coming? Just like now we have, clear, you could say, to pass through it. What's going to pop up? And then what are the ramifications or the considerations we need to have as those things happen is who all now gets that data and how many entities can request that one test? So I don't know, just things that are changing in the next near term, midterm, and then the long term. And long term, I mean, I'm hopeful that we go back to normal. But that's, I think it's the near and midterm that's uncertain.
but I think you bring up a really good point about the data and the security. We already have, when you talk about financial data and, the dark web and things like that, certainly I would be concerned who's, as I'm walking into some random, building and they're gathering data on me, like, hopefully, I think, Lisa, that this stuff is it by name? How do you, can you do it by a number?
Yeah, you can do it by like employee ID, unique ID. We had one production team that was like, we're gonna call people like Mickey Mouse, like everybody can have their own code name, whatever, and as long as the employer somewhere keeps track of that record, we don't need to house it for Xfinity. And also we're not holding any like HIPAA related data. We're not holding any vaccine data. And our data is hard deleted every 30 days. It's a rolling 30-day delete. So, and there's a limited number of people that have access to the data as well. It's like, there may be thousands of people in a corporation wearing our hardware, using the technology to enable social distancing, sending that data to the cloud, but there's only a few people from the organization, really under 5 that can run the reports. Yeah. And so,
good to know.
But I also think people are, if you compare this to something that you might have to put onto your phone or an app, there's no GPS, we're not tracking location, like we're tracking badges to badges, right? So yeah, if Lori and I went out to lunch and we ended up going out to like Neiman Marcus in the middle of our lunch, the company would know Lori and Lisa, they hung out for an hour over lunch. They don't know where we went, Right. And so there is something there. And I think really when you think about people's privacy, it's all about transparency. If people can understand what's being tracked, what isn't, and employers are completely upfront with them, they feel a lot better about it. They're opting in, and versus something that might get put on your phone or an app or a wearable that has to pair to a phone app. That would be something that I might be like, well, what else is my company getting off of this now?
Right. Well, I like the idea of being, if someone is infected with something, I like the idea of being alerted. So so I can take care of myself, take care of my family, take care of my elderly parents, and separate from them if I, not because I'm required to, because I just will,
Yeah, you want to know right away until you're able to go get tested yourself and get a negative test. At least you're not out there, spreading it to your loved ones. Yeah.
Right. And how would we get to Neiman Marcus if I'm
I never like go to Neiman Marcus. It just like came up. I was like, maybe it's like subconscious.
right.
Lori, I saw Phil asked a good question, which I think is important to ask. He asked if OSHA will differentiate between small and large businesses, noting many small businesses, startups won't be able to afford sophisticated systems. I mean, the good news is I don't think OSHA would expect anyone to adopt any of the technologies that we talk about. These are all things that are, if you can make them work, they're going to make your jobs a lot easier they're going to enhance safety. They're going to perhaps be ways to get customers be more comfortable coming in the door. But as far as the way the agency looks at it, I mean, their standards apply whether you have 5 employees or 5,000 employees. I mean, that said, they might expect a higher level of safety from a very sophisticated company, but they can't cite that company and say, well, you need to be doing the Rolls Royce, and this smaller company needs to be doing the less sophisticated. Most of what we're seeing in terms of pandemic response and protective measures are things that I think they're going to expect everybody, regardless of size or resources, to do. So, and unfortunately, some of that, I mean, requiring masks, you purchasing chemicals from the EPA's list N that are approved to kill COVID, requiring a cleaning schedule, checking your employees before they come to work, and social distancing are not going to be resource intensive.
Right. Any other questions? We're coming to the end, so speak now. Forever hold your COVID question. Yeah. All right. Well, then I just want to thank the panel and Aaron so much for this. I mean, it really was super interesting. I hope that people, how technology is going to keep us safe, keep us healthy, allow us to be together again, breathe the same healthy air, and have fun and go on vacations with our family and explore the world again, if only the United States, but maybe the whole world. And to feel also, I love the contactless check-in that I'm a little of a germaphobe, I will say. So being able to check in at quite a distance, again, gives me a sense of again, just safety or whatever. So I'm just thrilled to learn more about all your products. I hope that everyone that joined us today got something out of it, and will, if you're in a position to support these businesses or need help from a great attorney, you can reach out to us at Hub88. You can send an email, I think a hello at hub88.org will get to us, and we're happy to connect you.
Thanks for having us. This was fun. It was great being on here with everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. And next month, drone regulations and all things you need to know about what's happening here in Illinois and across the U.S. with regards to drones. So that'll be another really great topic. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks for having us.
Well, have a good
Bye.
evening.
Bye.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.